Welcome to Channel 17, the Town of Colonie Government Channel.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, but I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round again, the years keep rolling by.
Good evening, this is Joe Doolittle.
And good morning, this is Kate Dudding, depending on when you're watching us.
And we are Story by Story.
Sharing the human experience.
And Kate and I are storytellers, and we are pleased and proud to both tell stories, to help promote the art of storytelling in the Capital District. And we like to bring together some other folks of like minds and hearts and have them share stories. And we do commentary on storytelling. And most important, we tell you where you can find good storytelling programs in the Capital District.
Mm-hmm. Other than this one, but live storytelling.
Live storytelling. Mm-hmm. And I'm just thinking, I was, Sunday night I was at the Glenn Sanders Mansion, and two of my favorite storytellers were telling stories. And one of them was Kate, and the other was Margaret French. Mm-hmm. And, you know, storytelling at the mansion, some nights it's just right. And that was one of those nights where we had a goodly company gathered. We had wonderful stories of confident, strong-willed people who made a difference, who added certainty to the lives that they touched. It was really great, Kate.
Thank you.
We had fun.
Thank you.
And in another thing, I don't remember as many good affirmations coming from folks on the evaluations that we provided. And it was one of the few times, not that Angelo Mazzone and his crew don't do a great job with food, but we had everybody rank the main courses as a 5.
Yes.
How about them apples?
And we don't have a ranking for desserts, but it was chocolate. I hope you're not hungry. Oh, it was chocolate silk, a big nugget of it, a chunk of it, with 2 cookies and some whipped cream.
So there's another little corollary that goes with storytelling, is if you can have good food and drink with a good story, that may be as close to heaven as you're going to get in this lifetime, is what I'm thinking.
Good way of explaining that.
That's true. That's true. I wanted everybody to get that, in terms of. But I don't want you to experience storytelling in the hereafter. I'd like you guys to experience it in the present.
Yes. Unfortunately, our 13th season at the Story Sundays at the Glenn Sanders Mansion is over, but we'll be back in early fall, September or early October. We're just thinking of setting up that season right now.
Yep. Good. And we're going to talk a little bit about what's going on in storytelling at the end of the springtime. And we'll be with you in the beginning of summer and through the summer to tell you about what's going on through the course of the summer, because there's some fun programs coming up. But I want to kind of revisit maybe, stories this week that we're videoing is the week that the Titanic went down. Oh, we weren't going to talk about the Riverway, and then my partner has to throw her chest out there and advertise it. Riverway, the great regional storytelling festival, will be completed by the time you're viewing this, but you can still go to riverwaystorytellingfestival.com .org and read all about it and get ready for next year, because it's a great event. But certain moments in time get commemorated in our history, and the Titanic sinking has certainly been that. And I think for this region, for our town, so to speak, that the floods of last fall of Irene and Lee are going to be in our memories for a long time. And it was a devastating tragedy for the villages in the Schoharie Valley and the Mohawk Valley.
It'll be one of those things, well, before the flood. Or after the flood.
And one of the responses, and there have been many great responses to the needs of those folks in Schoharie and Middleburg and Rotterdam Junction, in money and in time, has been the stories. And I was privileged to work with a couple of storytellers to do some benefits for that program in Schoharie that went very well, thanks to a lot of you. And the stories echo, and they stay with us. And with us is Kent Busman, who is one of my partners in storytelling. Kent is an ordained minister in the Reformed Church, runs Camp Fowler and Conference Center, which is a center and a summer camp, year-round facility, but mostly a summer camp for youth in the Adirondacks up at Speculator. And he's been telling stories for as long as I've known him. But in one of the presentations this spring, at a regional offering of Sharing the Fire, he told a story that we were going to ask him to tell after we talk a little bit with him that captures some of the Schoharie story. And we feel it's more than memorable. So that's the lead up to that. I'd like to welcome Kent Busman here it's actually this morning. It's good to see you again, KB.
It's good to be back.
And,
Thanks.
you know, did you notice when he came in, he's wearing his summer shoes?
Yes.
And, you know, when it turns warm weather, you guys don't wear any socks anymore, right? You got your sandals on and you're really ready to go.
We're right up. I had the Adirondacks right after this show to take the first group out in the woods.
You're going. This is your group from the Midwest, or is this another?
It's a group from New Hampshire, high school group. We'll be out. We'll go rafting and we'll go hiking up for a couple days in the Adirondacks. So
Is this pre, post, or during black fly season?
you know, with climate change, it's hard to tell. Yes would be the answer.
You'll know when you get there.
Yeah.
I hope.
Typically, it would be pre, but
Yes.
with 91 degrees yesterday, it's hard to tell.
Yes, well, hopefully. I know you'll be prepared because you've lived through it before.
It'll be wonderful no matter what.
Yes.
Wonderful no matter what, even if the black flies have hatched.
Oh, it's great.
But
man.
there's always a story.
There's always a story.
If you live through it, there's a story
That's
to
right.
tell.
Well, anybody who has gone into the Adirondacks with Kent Busman as the guide or the group leader generally comes back with a story. Generally comes back.
Generally comes back.
Generally comes back. That's the first thing.
Let's just focus on
He
that
hasn't
for now.
left anybody there that I can remember. but no, you know, one of the things that I thought was interesting, since we've known each other a long time, and you know, your stories are, in some ways they're much the same, and in some ways they're different. Can you sense how your relationship with storytelling might have changed a little bit over the years?
I think with stories, they're just one way to make sense of the world. They're one way that you begin to put things into a certain order and a certain understanding. You know, I think of a lot of our faith stories in particular that helps ground us and helps keep us moving through uncharted territory, because all of life you're always moving into the unknown. So stories are one of those ways. And so as you change and as I change, certainly the relationship to the story changes. The same story that you heard when you were a kid takes on new meaning because suddenly you're a different character in the story, or what you bring to the story changes. So stories in that way are very interactive, are very much alive. And when for someone like me who finds it a helpful way to make sense of the world, it's always a dynamic relationship.
And sometimes it's what you need from the story.
Yeah.
It's what you bring and what you need is. I had an experience like that, and it was about Lou Gehrig. Carol Birch has a whole hour story about it. Lou, he was the son of immigrants, and he made good, I grew up in a Yankee household, so it was interesting. But we had just dropped my son off at college, and my takeaway that day was, oh, Lou Gehrig's mother hated his wife, and I'll always love whatever woman my son brings home, which I realized was a rather narrow sort of focus that not many people probably ever took away from that story. But that day, that's what I was hearing.
Yeah.
And I share this with the audience because often when we talk about storytelling and we think of ourselves as performers on one part, but as the stories themselves that you carry with you that help the audience or anybody help make sense of the world, that's an attribute for living that's as necessary as breath and life and anything else, because it's the way you build understanding. And thank you for that, KB. That was really pretty profound for a guy that's just a woodchuck.
For guys not wearing socks.
We do know that Ken is the Reverend Bushman too, so that I shouldn't be surprised by these profound remarks.
And you should be a little more respectful, perhaps.
Yeah, I should be. I should be. It's easy to respect KB.
But he's always in camouflage.
Yeah, he does.
He always, almost always.
Well,
Really?
Yeah,
I like that.
Have I ever seen you wearing your collar? I think I did, but then you were wearing a vest, so that was half camouflage.
I think stories also can help us reinterpret the world. So when I look at the story about Schoharie is also a story about work, and so often our world puts work into the four-letter category of just a nasty word. And a story like that, and maybe the next one that I tell, helps us redefine work in a way that may be helpful for someone and who's hearing, and that may be what they need out of that story. I don't know. That's why I guess that's why you never say, and this story means.
That's right.
Because that would just limit what it means.
And that was a great lead-in, having you tell the story, by the way.
Just trying to help, Joe.
Yeah, I know. You wanted to get out with it. Ken, many of your stories are still with me. This one is probably near the top of the list. And we'd like you to share it. And then we'll talk a little bit about the story and about Schoharie, too, because I think that's a good topic to revisit every once in a while with our viewers. Can you tell us a story, please?
Sure. The story comes from some experiences of working down in the Schoharie Valley after the floods. It's called The Lost Tools of Schoharie. And I'd like to say it's written down, but it's really not written down, so it changes. It like Schoharie, it's changing all the time. And so this time the story goes like this. I have in my shop down in my basement, I've got a toolbox that I made, old pine, wooden toolbox. I cut a broom handle, to make the handle, and I've got a strap on it because sometimes it's too heavy to carry. You throw the strap over your shoulder, and it's 2 feet long, so my framing square goes in there, and all the tools that I normally need to work on the car or to work out in the yard fit in there. And like most toolboxes, it just normally sits under the workbench or off to the side in the garage or wherever. It really doesn't get a whole lot of use outside of the home. But August 28, 2011 changed that for thousands of toolboxes. That's the day Hurricane Irene swept through the Schoharie Valley, and towns like Prattsville and Schoharie, Middleburg, Delanson were pretty well wiped out with 6 feet of water coming through town. And it was at that point that thousands of men and women grabbed their toolboxes and ran to Schoharie. And we didn't know what to put in our toolboxes. It's not like we had, a certain job to do. We just went going, because that's what you do when your neighbors and your friends and anyone is in need. You just go. And so we showed up with our toolboxes. In the first few weeks, our toolboxes weren't a whole lot of use, because we ended up using mainly 5-gallon buckets and going down and mucking out basements and carrying mud that 8, 12, 14 inches deep out of the basement of the Prattsville Reformed Church, bucket after bucket after bucket out, and all the homes that were like that. But then things began to evolve as a lot of the muck got out and we started to tear the houses apart. Our toolboxes began to get a little more use, and then I noticed something unusual happening to my tools. I noticed that they started disappearing. The first tool that I noticed missing was a little nail punch, about this long. I carry it right in the front of my nail pouch. And I was working with my friend Bruce and some others at Moe's house. And Moe's house, like them all, had been underwater, and his back room had a little crawl space underneath it, and the floor had all been buckled. And so we were replacing the floor, but before we replaced the floor, we wanted to put insulation under it so that it would be warmer, so that it, in some ways it would be better than it was before. Now, when you work in a place like Schoharie, there's two ways to do work. You can do work really fast so you can get the job done so you can go on to the next thing. Or you can work like this is the home of royalty, and you take your time and you do the job right. Nobody works the first way. And so Bruce and I looked at how we're going to insulate that, and we figured out the best way to do that was to take up one of the floor joists and put one of us underneath the floor all day. And there's about 1.5 feet, and to slide this solid insulation down, these 2.5 foot wide by 8 foot long sheets under there, and then you'd lie on your back and you'd nail it up like that. I won. I got the short straw. And so Bruce put me under the floor all day, and it's like it's like going down to the grave each time, and you're crawling under there, and you're putting this insulation up, and you're swinging as best you can with your hammer. And I did notice I kept losing my hat. But I'd taken, it was around Veterans Day when we were working on this, so I tied a little poppy to the back of my hat. And that's how I kept finding my hat. I still have it.
Still have it.
And so, and some other people showed up too. High school kids showed up, and they were eager to work. They didn't do anything. But they were happy to be there and happy to be part of it, and it was great to have them. Anyway, so crawling up and down all day, and we finally got the floor sealed up, and it was insulated well, and Mo was just so excited about it being done that way. They were packing up, and that's when I noticed that my nail punch was missing, and I knew that it was down there and it would never come back. And that started me thinking. And then the next time I was down, we were doing drywalling, and I brought a 4 foot long drywall square for cutting drywall, and because I'm not the best at drywalling, they had me ripping things up again. But we find out what our real gifts are when we're at places like Schoharie. So my other two friends who were with me at that point, Neil and whoever, he's a good friend. We were down there working, and they were working in the other room with my drywall square, and they were working, and I'm doing my thing, and suddenly I heard the words that I really never thought I would hear on a job site. And I hear my one friend say, "Hey, Neil, do you have any lipstick?" And Neil goes, "It's cherry gloss. Is that okay?" My other buddy goes, "That's my favorite." And I'm a pretty open guy. I'm open to lots of things, but that's just, I've worked on a lot of job sites. I'd never heard that before. So I peeked around the corner, and there were the guys with the lipstick, and they were putting it on the outlet boxes, the lipstick. And then they'd take the drywall and they'd shove it up on the outlet box and stick it there and pull it off, and they would know exactly where to cut out the outlets. I thought that was great. I've carried lipstick in my toolbox ever since. But I think I was so excited about this discovery of lipstick that when we left that day, I left my 4 foot square somewhere in Schoharie. Because you don't really know where you're working. You're just working on a house. And that's okay, because it's a good 4 foot square. But working there, I also noticed you don't just lose tools, you actually gain some tools. I found a hammer in my toolbox once, randomly. No idea how it got there, but I came home with an extra hammer. And one day, I was working, and this is where we're out of the mucking stage on this one house, and I'm with another pastor, and we're down, and we're hanging drywall, which is kind of fun to be doing some constructive work after all the destruction, after all the ripping out and tearing out of things. It's fun to start doing some real construction. So we're hanging drywall. And I'm in a house, and every house when you're working sort of gets a foreman. I don't know how it's done. I don't know if it's chosen or just sort of organically rises up out of the crew. And this guy Dick, was the foreman. And Dick is what I would call a serial cusser. And he would just be swearing all the time, and not in a bad way or not in a in-your-face way. It's just the way he talked, cussing this and whatever, all going on. And I'm working, hanging, cutting the drywall and trying to get it right. And we're there, for a good part of the day. And he finally asked me, "Well, what is it you do?" And I just turn with a sly grin on my face. I say, "Well, I'm a minister." He goes, "No shit." And and for the rest of the day, it was like, "I can't believe you're a minister," which I take as high praise. And and the same thing happens often when you tell people you're a minister. He just stopped swearing the rest of the day, and I felt bad because it was just kind of fun listening to him. But he had something I'd never seen before. It was. I mean, don't get me wrong, it's not as good as Jesus coming back, but it's close for a minister. He had what's called a dimpler, and he put it on his drill. And I'd never seen this before. And you'd take your drill and you'd take that drywall screw and you'd screw it into the wall, and the dimpler would keep your drill from going in too deep and popping all the way through the paper of the drywall. It was heaven. Who invented such a wondrous thing? And I raved about it all day. I raved about the dimpler. And at the end of the day, Dick said to me as we were leaving, he says, "I still can't believe you're a minister." And he held out his hand to shake my hand, and I shook his hand, and in his hand was the dimpler.
Oh.
And it's in my toolbox to this day. I still have Dick's dimpler. And I still, am amazed by that wonderful, wonderful tool. And when you're working in Schoharie, these sorts of things happen. And in Schoharie, what happens along with that is at 12 noon, the Presbyterian church bell rings. And when the Presbyterian church bell rings, people stop what they're working on, hanging drywall, mucking out basements, putting down baseboard. And they leave their tools, and they all walk out into the streets, and they meander in toward the Reformed Church in downtown. It's like little streams coming together on a kinder day. And we sit and we eat, and food miraculously appears. I know not how, but every day there's food for all of us. And there'd be 20, 40, 60 people working, and we just show up covered in drywall dust. And here'd be, these guys from IBM who are coming, taking a day off to come into work, or my 4 masked women from Rensselaer who came down with their sledgehammers, or the 2 Mormons from Salt Lake City who came in. And it was great, sinners and saints us all, just sitting down to eat. And it's a wonderful thing. And then when it's done, people get up and we go back to our jobs, and we go back to doing what we do. And that's a marvelous miracle that happened every day last fall. Maybe it's still happening. We'll have to see. And there are other wonderful things. There was a small parsonage in Prattsville that had been totally wiped out, and this young clergy couple were trying to get it done, and they had a drywall blitz. And there were 44 of us on a Saturday that came in and worked in this house, all with our toolboxes. We put them down, and when there's 44 of you, it's like ants on an anthill working around hanging drywall, and you all sort of take your space and you're going. And the toolboxes are sort of like common property. And you don't really ask, and nobody really wonders. Tools just kind of flow back and forth that day, which in and of itself is quite amazing, because guys tend to be pretty protective of that sort of thing. But I remember that I was working in a space, and remember that hammer that I found in my toolbox? I was using it to knock some studs out, and I'd placed it in the wall, and I'd gotten called into another room to work for about a half hour, and I came back, and that wall where my hammer was all drywall. I suspect it's behind there. It's behind the drywall, that hammer. But the last tool that I want to share about was my rig axe. And a rig axe, I framed houses in Colorado before moving here to become a camp director. And it's a 32-ounce waffle-headed framing hammer. And the back side of it looks like a hatchet. And it's great for finesse work when you're framing, to really pound something that needs to be cut down to size. And that rig axe was just wonderful for taking out aggression, for ripping down cabinets and dealing with all those questions that you don't have any answers for about a flood that deep in a place like Schoharie. And I remember, just swinging away, working out all my theological difficulties on those cabinets. And the noon whistle rang. We put down our tools. We left the place that we were working. And when I got back, the hammer was gone. So was all the wood that was around, because things just happen. And it's just gone. And who knows where? Maybe in somebody else's toolbox by mistake. Maybe in the landfill that went. But in Schoharie, everybody lost something precious. Everybody lost something that they loved. And in that valley, people are coming back, and people are volunteering and working to rebuild a town. And something new has happened there, and that's a delightful thing. But I worry about Schoharie and Prattsville and Middleburg and Delanson. I worry that the day will come when the Presbyterian church bell rings and only Presbyterians show up. I worry about the day when we sit down to eat together and we make up reasons again about why we don't like these other people. But when that day happens, our tools will remind us. Our tools will whisper up from beneath the floors, or from out of the walls, or from our toolboxes. And our tools will remind us about what's really important and about what really has happened in Schoharie. The lost tools of Schoharie.
Thank you, Kent Busman.
That was only the second time I've heard it. I hope I hear it again.
It's only the second time I told it.
Oh, we're together then. And this version, just for your information, was close to 15, a little under 15.
It's. I guess I need to ask you, I think I know the answer. How did you find yourself in Schoharie the first time? How did that? I know a number of calls went out. Did you just show up? Did you go down with folks from your church?
The first time I went down with folks from the church, a pastor named Stacy Midge had been taking groups down to work, and so I hooked up with Stacy and went down. And because it doesn't really matter. People were showing up in all sorts of ways, but that's how I got there.
And the Lost Tools is a story of many stories. And as I was listening to it, I almost wanted you to tell me more about the high school kids, or tell me more about Dick, or
the masked women.
Oh my goodness, they were funny. These women showed up from Rensselaer, and we were ripping up this would have been a beautiful. The whole house was wooden floors, and it was like an ocean wave. The floor had all buckled. But there's so much dust, and I suspect that all of us have our lives cut short by days or weeks or longer, depending on how long we were there, with the stuff that we were breathing. And so they had their bandanas on, and and it was great. It was like a big train robbery, I thought.
Big train.
And we were laughing all day.
And my point was not only to tell me another story, but there are so many stories, and I'm just thinking about if you go to SchoharieRecovery.org, that's a clearinghouse that actually is a good story in of itself, because it came from the community organizations within Schoharie to create kind of a reference and a funnel for the work and the resources that need to go through there. But if you haven't looked at that resource, on the web, there's some great stories there, and there's also a catalog of other continuing needs that people can apply themselves to.
Yeah, and those needs will be going on for at least another year. It's 7 months basically today since the flood, and the whole town of Prattsville was pretty well knocked off, and they're a long way from being anywhere. Same with Middleburg, but they're getting things like food pantries up and running. They're getting the basics taken care of. They're redesigning the town. Prattsburg has a real excellent town redesign to take this disaster and look at how can we be a town again? How can we be a place of community? The fact that the church in Prattsville, they're not going to put pews back in, so it can be more of a community center, used as a space of worship as well as a space in town, because that old Dutch barn of a church didn't move in all that water. Lost the drywall and stuff, but the beams held firm. And so these towns, there's a lot of work left to be done, and you don't have to be skilled. I mean, that's helpful. If you're an electrician, please come, or a plumber. But you don't have to be. We need those high school kids. We need anybody who wants to help.
Yeah, I heard that in Schoharie, 94% of the businesses were destroyed.
Yeah, I believe it.
I think there was one that was up and running shortly thereafter.
The fact that anything can come back after that's quite a miracle in and of itself.
Right. It's really, now, in terms of collecting these stories and putting together a theme for this story, when you were approached to do the Sharing the Fire story, and that was like Stories of New York was the theme, and you got approached because you're a very good teller, but you hadn't put that story together?
No.
So when you began to say, what do I want to tell? And you got a lot of stories about New York, right?
I do a fair amount.
So this newbie bubbled up.
Yeah, well, that conference, that's an honor to be able to tell at a Lane's conference, and so I thought it should be. I thought if I could do an original story, that would be helpful. And this is a significant event in certainly in my world. This flood in that area affected a lot of my friends, a lot of people I work with and know. And Camp Fowler does work in the Schoharie Valley with running a day camp, and so those kids were our kids on more than one level. And so I thought it would be good to raise that awareness to that crowd, hopefully in an enjoyable way and not a.
Oh, it was. It's certainly not disconcerting to listen to the stories, but they and it is an evocative story about what's possible, I suppose, in the founders.
In the face of any disaster.
Yeah.
Oh, and just for those of you who are not familiar with Sharing the Fire or Lanes, it's League for the Advancement of New England Storytelling. They have a yearly conference. This was the 31st, I believe, and it will be in Albany for this year and then the next 2 years. So look for that next March.
Right, and the Friday night kickoff concert is one that's traditionally at Lane's been a local teller venue and showcase. And I'll tell a little story because there were some wonderful stories about New York from all these tellers, and Kent was the last teller. And the teller before you had told a powerful story about the fact that she lived about a mile north of the World Trade Center, and it was a 9/11 story. And I hadn't heard your story, and I remember sitting in the back of that auditorium at Page Hall saying, "Oh man, am I glad I don't have to follow that one." And as you told the story, it was just so perfect in the message that it sold, and it balanced and went with the earlier stories. So Lorraine Harton-Gilardi, who is another storyteller who's been on our program, was the MC and the organizer of that. And I said to myself, I said, Lorraine, you did really a great job lining those people up. So
Yes, you did.
we're going to come back, Kent. We're going to talk a little bit about what's going on with storytelling in the Capital District. And I'm going to turn to you because you know all that stuff.
Well, I particularly know what's happening on May 6th at 2 o'clock at Proctor's because I'm one of the tellers.
Wow.
I'll be telling with Gert Johnson, who is the head of the Interfaith Story Circle of the Tri-City area. And all of our stories touch on the name of our program, Inspirations.
Inspirations.
Now, these will be all different stories than I told at Glenn Sanders' mansion. I have a lot of stories.
Yeah.
And
But this will be good because inspirations, inspire in the Greek is literally to breathe, right?
Mm-hmm.
To the very root of all substance. So that's going to be a special kind of
so
talk.
we have true stories, we have folk tales, and Siri Allison from Salem will be once again supplying coffee and snacks at intermission.
And remember, good stories and good food make for a great experience.
Right.
That's what we're doing.
Right, and this could be an early Mother's Day expedition. The stories would be suitable for that. In fact, one of my stories is the mother of Sing Sing, and I won't tell you any more about that. But have either of you heard of
I haven't heard about Sing Sing in my parlance. Being kind of a Hudson River kid, it was always the prison.
Well,
you know.
it is.
Yeah. Oh,
Yes.
the mother of Sing Sing.
Yes. Okay.
Sounds a little kinky to me.
No, it's,
no, we don't go
it's
there.
inspirations. Remember, inspirations.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, so if you're curious, then we'd like to see you at Proctor's on May 6th.
And if you go to our website, storycircle@proctors.org, you can get a coupon that'll save you $4 a ticket.
And you'll still get cookies and coffee
Yes.
and things at intermission.
Right.
Okay. What else we got?
Then on Monday, May 12th, that doesn't seem to add up. I bet it's May 14th. Yes, as you see on the screen on the corrected slide, Monday, May 14th at 7 p.m., our storytelling open mic in Saratoga is at Cafe Lena, and our feature teller is Janet Carter from Saugerties. She'll be telling about 20 minutes of stories, as Kent did earlier
March?
this year.
You did in March.
Yes,
March, I think.
probably March 12th, because
Probably.
The M is the same. I
Right,
understand.
yeah. I'm lucky it wasn't Mary
Yeah,
instead
okay.
of May.
Yeah.
So Monday, May 14th, Janet Carter. She'll do about 20 minutes, and then there'll be other tellers who will tell stories there also. And it's a very reasonable $3, and there are baked goods and coffee and tea that you can get for $1 each.
And it's also at Cafe Lena's. So if you've not been up to that special place, being a recovering 60 hippie, I have a very fond spot in my heart for all the nostalgia that goes on there. It's a great place just to be.
Right.
And,
It's the oldest continuous running coffee house in the country. So there must be something that's older but wasn't continuous, but I don't know what that one is. And Bob Dylan was there before he was Bob Dylan. Christine Lavin was there as a waitress first, before as a performer. Utah Phillips, Rosalie Sorrell.
You're in great company when
Right.
you're in that room, because there's been a lot of wonderful people there as performers and as listeners. So join us on the 14th of May.
Now, this you know something about. This is a heads up for early June, June 9th in Clinton, New York. Now, Clinton, New York, where is that, Joe?
New York is just outside of Utica, and this is a story of a community building storytelling as a way of celebrating community, and it's free. And it comes from, of all places, the Presbyterian Church. The minister of the Presbyterian Church is a biblical storyteller. He's a friend of our good friend from Trinity Presbyterian,
Tim Coombs.
Tim Coombs. And they decided as a congregation that their use of story could be shared. And they have some nationally known tellers coming. There's Odds Bodkin, who is renowned for some of his work on making the old Greek myths contemporaneous to today's issues. Among the issues he deals with is bullying. There are several other tellers.
Beauty and the Beast storytellers from Ithaca. They're extraordinary storytellers. You know, a tandem team. They're a married couple, but they never define which of them is Beauty and which of them is the Beast. But maybe it changes.
Oh, we know who those are. Don't give us that.
No, he's good looking too.
Okay.
Yes.
And
Martha and Mitch, and they have different last names, and one of them is Hamilton. Becky Holder, who used to be a storyteller here, now lives out
in Pena,
west of that, but she's going to be there. Joe and Jesse Bruchak, who have been on our show,
Right.
they're going to be there, and some other folks that we'll learn about if you go to villagestorytellingfestival.org.
It starts at 10 and it runs to 10 at night. And there are
Marnie Gillard's going to be there too.
that's right. There are multiple venues and workshops and things. And I have not been there myself. This will be my first year to go and listen. But we really love the fact that it's part of our market area, so to speak, and that there's this kind of action going on. And Scott Leonard is one of the producers up there, and he's a very, very handy guy, and I encourage you. You could go up and get there in time at 10. You could have lunch in the Presbyterian Church and support the Presbyterian Church, and you could enjoy the storytelling, and you could come home at any time you want. But it's worth the trip, is what I think.
And just near Utica, heck.
Well, you go to the brewery. Tour,
You'll have to get another story about Joe's pub crawl.
There are many stories about this.
Now, and we hope you will tell people about storytelling, that word of mouth is the way the art of storytelling gets spread. It finally occurred to me there's never going to be one some sort of event and everyone will go, oh, that's what storytelling about. No, it's always about somebody saying, I went to this and I had no idea what to expect, but it was really wonderful. You'll have to come with me the next time. Well, if you're talking to a friend who goes, they read stories to children in libraries, you go, no. Storytelling is the first performing art. It's the first form of theater. It's like a one-person, a solo performer. You can point them to over 60 stories that we have, thanks to the Colonie Town TV station. We've cut the stories out of these shows. Over 60 stories at storycircle@proctors.org. Click on YouTube. And you can find Kent there telling other stories, and lots of other people.
And this story will be up there probably sometime around the end of May. So if you want to share Kent with a friend, you can just have them go online and hear the story of Scary.
And if you would like to help us, we are a poor arts organization with a dental floss budget. There's a place on our website also where how you can help, and we would appreciate all the help.
And we do appreciate the help. We should say thank you to those who have supported us for this season at Proctor's and at the Glenn Sanders Mansion and with Telebration. And we were able to assure every teller who told at Proctor's that they got an honorarium out of those donations. And Telebration, which is going to be coming up again in November, we're going to fund how many programs off of the...
We're funding 4 storytelling programs. No, 5 storytelling programs from our profits from the last 2 Telebrations.
Right. So storytellers donate their time to Telebration, and then we recycle the funding surplus into community events that promote storytelling. So we keep the money in flow. But if you have any inclination to help us start the flow, that's really good. That'd be good.
We've been doing Telebration for over 15 years, and we've underwritten over 80 storytelling programs from those, the generosity of our audiences at Telebration. So we thank you.
So thank you. Let's get back to Kent again. You know,
we do have almost 15 minutes left.
We
so.
do have 15 minutes. So, Kent,
That's
you know,
perfect.
we could probably debrief another story, but in order to debrief another story, we'd have to have you tell another story. And I would ask you to tell a story that was, you know, something between 8 to 12 minutes, so we could say a little something about it before we say goodbye to the folks.
Good. I'm not sure how to do that, Joe, but
Well, when we get to about 10, I'll
Kate can
kind
go
of
like
go,
this, yeah.
you know, I'll go like this, 10.
well, this is. I told you earlier that I like to think, sort of mythologically, the life through stories, right? And part of that is just really playful. And I realize I don't know a lot about my relatives from the Midwest, but I know enough, and I like to put them in stories. And so I like to put my grandpa and grandma, Jakob and Minnie, in stories and in old folk tales, just to see what happens to them. And so this is one of them. This is a Jakob and Minnie story. Jakob and Minnie, yeah, they're good Dutch folks. They moved to West Michigan. That's where, because it was swampy there, and it felt like home. It felt like the Netherlands. And they set up a little farm there, and their first farm that they had, they didn't have any money, so they built a small cabin basically, but it was sod, and it was a grass roof, and it was beside a hill so that the winds coming off of the lake wouldn't be so cold in the wintertime. And then and they had a cow and a pig, and a small farm, and they were happy. They were happy. They'd worked together. They enjoyed life. And then the first child came. My Uncle Harold came, and when the first child came, then Minnie didn't go out into the field with Jakob anymore to work. And Jakob, he'd come home there after every day, and he'd be out in the hot, sweating sun and being out all day, and he'd see Minnie sitting in the rocking chair with the baby just sleeping there, and he goes, "Yeah, there, Minnie, what'd you do all day? Just sit there? Yeah, it must be nice to have such an easy time of it all. I was out there working in the hot sun." And Minnie, she's a wise woman. She says, "Oh, Jakob, yeah, you do work hard. You do work hard." "Yeah," he says, "yeah, I do. I work hard, much harder than there's nothing for you to do. You just sit with that baby all day. God, I wish I had life that easy." And Minnie said, "Well, maybe we could make that work. I'd like to switch jobs. I'd like to offer you a gift, Jakob. Let's switch jobs for one day. You look like you could use a break. You can stay here with baby Harold and work with the house, and I'll go out into the field and I'll cut the hay. And tomorrow we'll do that. I'll cut the hay tomorrow, and you can be here." It's just, yeah, that'd be like a vacation for me there. I'd have nothing to do. It'd be so easy. "Yeah, Jakob, I'd like to give you this gift." So the next morning they got up, and Minnie said, "Now, Jakob, there's just a couple things you have to remember. You have to milk the cow and take her out to pasture. You have to feed the baby, right? And you have to churn the milk into butter and to make it for the midday dinner, so that we have something to eat. So you get those things done. You ring the bell at midday, and I'll come back for dinner, and we'll talk and see how everybody's day's going there." "Oh, yeah, that's so easy. Okay, what am I going to do with all the rest of my time, I wonder?" So Minnie kissed him on the cheek, as she always did, and she took the big scythe that's just outside the door and went out to start cutting of hay. And baby Harold was still asleep, and Jakob, he'd never been home in the morning with nothing to do. So he put his feet up. He put his feet up on the furniture. You're never supposed to do that in Minnie's house. And he fell fast asleep because he had nothing to do. Well, suddenly the baby starts crying. He wakes up, and it's like an hour's passed. And the baby's crying, and the baby's really hungry. And so Jakob goes, "Oh, no, what? I'm supposed to go out and milk the cow." So he grabs the screaming baby, screaming in his ears, and he goes out to the cow, and he milks the cow. Now Jakob, he's a good cow milker, but he's never had to milk a cow with one hand with a baby screaming in his ear. And so he's milking that Bessie for all she's worth. He's milking that cow, and that baby's still hungry, and he gets enough in the bucket, gets enough, and he comes back, but he's in a hurry, and this must be a family trait, perhaps, but he forgets when he's in a hurry, and he forgot to shut the gate, and so the pig was loose. So he gets into the house, and he gives the baby some milk, and the baby settles down, all right? And he pours the milk into the butter churn, And he's just about ready to start turning the butter, and he looks out, and there's the pig walking around. And Jakob runs outside. He says, "Yeah, pig, you got to get back into your pen." And he gets the pig back in the pen. And just as he gets the pig back in the pen and shuts the door, he hears this crash. And the babies start crying. And he runs back to the house, and there's milk all over the floor. The baby's covered in milk and crying away. And Jakob goes, "Now there's no milk to make butter for the midday meal. I have to go back and milk the cow." So he takes that screaming baby back in his hand, he takes the bucket, and he goes out, and he milks the cow a second time. Now, it's hard enough to milk a cow with one hand the first time, but if you have to do it the second time within a half hour, that ain't too easy. But Jakob, he's persistent, and he gets enough milk out of that cow, and he comes back, and the baby now is calming down, sets the baby down, but guess what Jakob forgot to do again? He forgot to shut the gate, because he's sort of a get the job done kind of guy and not worry about the other parts of it. So he starts churning that milk into butter. And he's working hard, he's working up a sweat, and he gets that churned into butter. And he's thinking, boy, it's hot in here and it's hard work. And then he remembers that down in the cellar, he had a nice big keg of ale. Now it's a little early in the day, but Minnie's gone, and I have worked up a powerful thirst. And the baby's fine. So Jakob leaves that butter churn and goes down into the cellar. And he takes the tap, and he's got the bung, and he's about ready to pull it out in time to put the tap in so that, it doesn't leak anything. And just as he pulls that bung out, he hears oink, 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 upstairs. He says, "That pig!" And he runs upstairs, and there's the pig who had knocked over the butter churn and was slopping up the butter. And Jakob takes that tap, which is still in his hand, and he throws it at that pig. And for the first time in his life, he hits his target. And he hits that pig with that tap right in the middle of his forehead, and that pig falls over and dies dead. And Jakob goes, "Oh dear, now I shouldn't have done that. Oh, Minnie's not going to like this. And what am I going to do?" So he goes to the back door, he opens the back door, and he starts dragging that pig out the back door so Minnie won't see it. And he gets that pig halfway out the back door when he hears glug, 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 glug. And he goes, "Oh no." And he runs downstairs, and he had taken the bung out of the tap, but he hadn't put the tap in. And so the whole keg had drained out, and there's about 6 inches of ale all over the dirt floor of the cellar. And Jakob's just shaking his head. And then he remembers, he's got to get the midday meal going. So he runs upstairs, and he starts the fire in the chimney, and he checks, the baby's still there. Okay, that's good. He hasn't lost the baby yet. And he realizes he's not got the cow out to pasture. He ain't got time to get the cow out to pasture and get back and get the meal made. But Jakob, he's a smart man. And so he goes, on top of this house, there's grass growing. All I got to do is get that cow on top of the house, and she can graze up there, and Minnie would never know. So he takes a rope, takes 2 of his planks, he walks that cow out up the hill next to the house, and he drops those planks down on the grass roof of the house, and he takes that cow, and he tries to pull that cow across, and the cow, of course, will have nothing to do with that. But Jakob's pretty strong, and he's that short Dutchman, so he finally pulls that cow across and gets that cow on the roof, and this cow starts grazing away, and Jakob goes, "That's pretty smart of you, Jakob. You're a pretty smart guy, but what if that cow steps too far to the edge? You don't want the cow to fall off." I got that planned. So he takes the rope around the cow's neck, and he lowers it down the chimney. And he runs inside, and he takes that rope from the chimney, and he ties it around his waist. So if the cow gets a little close, all he has to do is pull on the rope, and the cow will just come back closer to the center of the roof. Right? So Jakob's working down there, and he's thinking, this is going to work out just fine. I'm going to be just fine. He gets her stuff about ready to start cleaning up the house and get the meal going, when the cow notices that the grass is always greener on the other side of the roof. And he goes over, and he steps off the roof. And the cow goes, woo, down. And that rope, zing, tight. And Jakob goes, wah, right up and wedges in the chimney. Gets stuck in the chimney. And the cow is swinging on the roof. Off the roof, somewhere between the ground and God. Now, Minnie has noticed that the dinner bell hasn't rung. And so she comes walking over the hill with her sigh and wondering what's going on. And she looks down, and she sees that cow just sort of hanging there in midair. And she goes, ah! And she runs down, she takes it aside, and she cuts that rope. And the cow goes, moo! Poof! And inside she hears, wah! Splash! And Jakob ends up right in the middle of that kettle of boiling water. And it's sitting there in the fireplace. And Minnie walks and opens the door. And she looks. And she sees an overturned butter churn on the floor with a baby covered in butter playing in it. She looks across the room and she sees the two hind legs of her pig, or what was left thereof. She sniffs and notices the faint smell of stale ale coming out of the cellar. And she looks over and she sees Jakob sitting in a bowl of stew in the fireplace. And Minnie, being a wise woman, simply said, "Well there now, Jakob. How was your morning?" And that was the last time they say that they ever switched jobs.
Oh, thank you, Kent Busman. So, now, have you told that to your brothers and their families? Have you done that?
Maybe not.
Maybe not. Maybe not. Too close to home over in Western Michigan.
I don't know if they'll get this at all or
Okay.
see this online, but
Well, I'll send you the link, and you can tell.
it'd be a nice gift, don't you think, there now?
Yes.
That's just it's a great story, and it is kind of a recycling of an old folk story.
Oh,
but
it
it's
is.
just
And
wonderful.
Siri Allison sat there. I think one of the first times we taped here, because her story is the first one on our on our YouTube channel, and she tells it from her Norwegian background.
The Norse do that too, eh?
Yeah.
Oh my
Well-
goodness, I thought it was just us Dutch people.
She said that in Norway, the houses have the roofs come down almost to the ground. And so that's why it was real easy to get the cow on the roof.
Yeah, that's not
no
so easy for
planks
us.
needed up in Norway.
Needed a plank in the Netherlands.
Yes, clever those Dutch.
They are.
Oh man, and that's just
It's one way to say I love you in an odd sort of way.
I
Very
remember
large
you.
family.
Well,
Yeah.
you said you didn't know much about them.
But it's a way of
Yes.
digging up things about them.
Yes. I was never a kindred spirit with my grandmother, Mary Winifred Kiley Ike. But I have a story about the potato famine, and one character is called Mary and the other one's called Winifred. They were sisters.
It's sort of like an artist paint people they know into the picture, right?
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
It's kind of fun to do.
Yeah.
Yep. Man, that was fun. That was fun. It's stories make you laugh a lot, but just that the frivolous nature of the story is a release in itself, and so as a listener, letting yourself go is part of the gift.
And it also reminds us of the time where we were trying to do good and didn't really work out as we had planned. And
I think as a husband and father, I've landed in a few.
those problems
I
too.
think I've landed in
Yeah.
a few kettles.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we used, my husband and I, who've been married 40 years now, every once in a while, but less and less frequently, of you do, I do. Well, I do this, why aren't, and then I do this, and but enough of that. We are coming to the end of our show. Thank you, Kent Busman, for taking time out of your
welcome.
busy schedule for coming here and sharing
welcome.
stories from Schoharie and Western Michigan via Norway, via wherever the folktale came from.
Do we have time to read a poem, or have we said the last word? Well, we've said the last word. We've told the last story for today. Thanks for watching.
And we hope you come back again.
It goes all my life's a circle, sunrise and sundown. The moon rolls through the nighttime till the daybreak comes around. And all my life's a circle, but I can't tell you why. Seasons spinning round,